Um, Thanks, Tammy. I'll start by saying I think COVID for me has affected how I think traditional academics are administered. We have context sessions that are synchronous, which means that as I'm talking, uh, the student has the opportunity to interject and say, "Hey, I don't understand what's happening." What's like the conversation is more direct. But with COVID, we've had to sort of teach and students have to learn asynchronously. And because of that, you have to sort of change and facilitate the lesson such that there is a bit more self-learning that can happen, because often the learning sits maybe on my side, and because it's asynchronous, as I'm dishing it out, I'm verbally giving out the knowledge. But unfortunately, not all students have access to me in this time because we have challenges with data and connectivity. So you have to allow a lot of self-learning on the other end and hope that that knowledge is relayed as it needs to be. But also, I think my biggest effect from COVID would be assessment, the quality of assessment. How do you sort of test the graduate attributes that students need to leave varsity with in terms of engineering, and be sure that you really assessed that student as you needed to, because unfortunately a lot of things have to be done on their own. So how do you know that they are honest enough and everything that comes with what we try to do with assessment? And that's a big challenge. So we are finding that we are moving to a lot of dish out a lot of assessments, but maybe possibly have them count not as much as they would usually, because we're hoping that when things change and they can come back to campus, that we can then really have assessments that have a bit more weight. And that's a bit worrying and frustrating, because this is time. You're having a lot of time. What happens if COVID doesn't get back to normal as we think up until maybe next day, June? What happens to this year's class of students? And how do we end up feeling like, you know what, the level of assessment that we gave is a true reflection of where the student is or isn't in relation to engineering? So that's some of the stuff that have affected me as an academic. If you'll allow me to continue, then there's the other side. So there's the part where we share knowledge and teach, but then there's the other part where we are trying to gain knowledge. So I feel like COVID has affected the knowledge sharing and collaboration. It suffers because conferences are conducted remotely, if at all. Some conferences have sort of been cancelled, some have been moved to a remote sort of facility. And collaboration suffers from that, because sometimes you go to these conferences and you find through someone sitting through a presentation, they're like, you know what, I enjoyed that presentation. Yeah, here's my business card. Let's talk a bit further. And collaboration stems from that. So if it's done remotely, I mean, we can all join a Zoom meeting or any other platform, but sometimes you don't have that opportunity over lunch or a drinks break to just speak to people that you probably wouldn't have had the opportunity to speak to, and find, hey, you know what, there might be something that could come from this. So that part, I think, is also we are affected as academics because of COVID.
Yeah, so I have, actually this week I had a postgraduate week running, and I had to narrate all my lectures, and it takes an awful lot of time to try and do that. For every hour that I stand in the classroom, I need probably 2.5 hours to narrate it and then trim it and, you know, make sure that the size is as small as possible. So, you know, it has taken me 2.5 times as much time to deliver the course. Then I agree with Tato. In the classroom, you can see if somebody doesn't understand, even if they don't put their hands up. You can see it in their faces. They don't understand. You need to explain things again. And there is some of the calculations where, you know, I'm a typical mover in the classroom, where I go from the one whiteboard to the next whiteboard, you know, show them how from this number I go to the next number. And I can't do that narrated. So I'm trying to think about how can I get across what I normally get across with just my own movement from, you know, the one matrix to the next matrix, and how these numbers are calculated. And that is incredibly difficult. And even last night I realized, you know, I explained the one way, but I didn't explain the next way. So now I need to put an announcement out that if things are negative, it works slightly different type thing. So that's difficult. I was very fortunate that just before whole COVID hit the rest of the world, I did go to a conference in the United States, and that was very stimulating. There are 2 conferences back to back. Before that, I saw an academic in New York. So, you know, that interaction that Tato is talking about, I did have, at least in the beginning of the year. So I'm glad about that. And what Zoom provides us with is to actually have these webinars. So now we asked to either join webinars or talk at webinars that we normally wouldn't do. You know, we would wait for the next conference to come. So that to me is an advantage. Another big advantage I find is I'm often asked to assist in projects. I'm working for the city of Tshwane and the city of Ekurhuleni at the moment. And in the past, it was always, you know, I'm stuck in Cape Town, and obviously I can't fly up for every meeting, etc. Now everybody is sitting at home, so there's no difference between me and anybody sitting in Joburg. So all of a sudden, I'm more part of the team than I was previously, which is quite interesting.